expecting families that have more resources to pay a bigger portion of the tab for their college education?
No, not necessarily, because these are schools are, we have free public schools that are supported by taxation. The question is, what's the mix of taxation between the local school district and the state? So I would not draw a comparison as you did.
Tim, I know you're not familiar necessarily with individual districts, but obviously our readers are going to be reading charts of individual districts. So what do you say to folks who are looking at, for example, Franklin County, and they see, what I did was I've added the core aid plus TPP for each year to get a full state number, and then if you do that, New Albany, for example, gets 10% each year, while districts like Dublin and Bexley and Upper Arlington see cuts of 8-9% or more each year. What do you say to folks about why there's that dynamic between among districts that are all suburban, all relatively wealthy?
I would say that we have a formula that, I mean, there are individual circumstances that drive each of those numbers. Perhaps someone is losing students. Perhaps someone is gaining students. Perhaps what is happening with their valuations? If their valuations are growing, then they would be expected to have a greater local share. And again, now, so you're looking at state aid, the 8% reduction in state aid. I mean, go to the next column over. And I think it would be, I mean, I would urge you when you print your tables in the newspaper to don't just say what's the change in state aid. Use the column that indicates what is the change in state aid relative to their total state and local capacity. So in Upper Arlington's case, I think it's 0.5 or 0.6. I mean, they lose 15%. I mean, I am familiar with that district because I live there, and so I did happen to look at it. And you can also see there was no favoritism from this office for the district of residence of the director. So they lose 15% of their state aid, but that's only 0.5, Jim, or 0.6 of their total state and local capacity as we calculate it. So it's $500,000. I mean, again, I think out because of my private life, I know that, their budget's about 80 or 85 million bucks. So they're going to lose $500,000 out of an 80 or 85 million dollar budget. And again, if you run that exercise for, Dublin, or, I mean, I forget the others who you said had those negative numbers, I mean, you're talking about something on that same scale. So again, the formula operates based on how many students you have, what your valuation is, what the characteristics of your students are. Now, there's a complicating factor. When policy changes are made, there are different variables that are introduced that also affect districts, what districts' earnings are going to be. The other factor is guarantees. I mean, I talked a little bit about this in my testimony. Guarantees are not just to like what the formula would have given you last year. Guarantees are you're going to get the same amount of money that you got last year. And sometimes the amount you got last year was not calculated by a formula, it was a guarantee, and so on and so forth. I mean, I believe it's the case that Upper Arlington has been on the guarantee for 13 consecutive years, and that's as far back as we could obtain data here. So you'll have other districts that are similarly situated, where the last time that the formula actually operated, that the variables in the formula were calculated, their set of circumstances was dramatically different. They might have had a dramatically different number of kids. They might have had a dramatically different valuation per pupil, different income, different mix of students that drives the payment. And so when you make changes, or when you allow the guarantee to, you allow aid to drop, suddenly those factors begin to come into play. I mean, are those districts all negative 1% in the far right-hand column, Jim?
I don't know, I kind of tore
You're looking
apart
at the
maybe the
post-
spreadsheet out of it, so.
You're looking at the after TPP numbers, right? Because, I mean, I'm looking here, New Albany is plus 0.6%, plus 0.68 of 1%, right?
Yeah, and that's another thing I want to point out. You know, there are,
That's not a lot.
yeah, I don't know if you're looking at the post-TPP or just the foundation.
Well, I looked at foundation plus, I put the core aid plus TPP.
Okay. Okay.
Make sure
And
people
it could be,
understand.
they may be, I don't know if they have TPP or not. You don't have my column there, my column of,
New Albany does not have TPP,
yeah.
so they're getting a 10% increase in their cap.
I bet you, I
It's
don't,
just foundation money that they're, same with, Westerville, which is the
is
same.
Dublin a TPP district?
Yeah.
Dublin is a TPP district. So that, and that explains it in part. I mean, if you're a TPP district, if you're gonna do that chart, you gotta note whether somebody's losing TPP or not.
Sure.
And again, I would encourage you to have that percentage change column, that, you know, the percentage change column of what is the change relative to total state and local resources.
And make sure you clarify the importance of looking off of the right spreadsheet, because we already had to correct one person, not in the room, about looking at the wrong spreadsheet.
What's the wrong one? What's the
The
right
after,
one? After
if you want to look
TPP.
at net impact.
Well, it depends what you wanna
It's
talk
the-
about.
We all
after
want net
TPP.
impact, which
Correct,
is
correct. That's
state
after
stuff
TPP.
with TPP.
Well,
Correct.
I want to talk about both of them. I think you ought to print a just foundation formula, and then you ought to print one that's that foundation and TPP, and
Because we
you ought to
have
explain.
reams of space, and we need to explain it to the readers.
Well,
I
I mean,
don't think-
but here's the deal. This is the thing about school funding. It is exceedingly complicated. It cannot be boiled down. It cannot be boiled down to a chart in the newspaper that says District X loses 6%. Oh, this is terrible. It is a very complicated calculation based on a whole series of variables where the state is trying to efficiently and effectively distribute aid to those districts who have the less capacity to raise revenue locally. And
Well, I can tell you right now, we're gonna boil it down to charts in the paper tomorrow and the next day and the day after that. And it's not gonna be spreadsheet this and spreadsheet that.